It was November, and it was a beautiful sunny day. People were out on the beach, and they said, looks like a great place to us. And so the three guys, three pregnant women, and that's all we knew about Long Beach was that they were welcoming three new lawyers, and it was a lovely place to live.
Now, when you arrived here, were there things that you immediately liked about it? And what was the contrast to Brooklyn?
Well, nothing's like New York, but well, it's interesting because I have been a lifelong member of the League of Women Voters. In college, the wife of my English professor my college was a small women's college in Long Island where Democrats, you might find one or two here and there. But she had said, girls, you have to join the League of Women Voters. And I have done that ever since. And so when I got here, that was one of the first things that I chose to do. And with that, I discovered that unlike New York, you could walk into City Hall, you could talk to a council person by his first name, and it was a whole different feeling. You could feel like you really could be a part of the government here because it was small. We had about 300,000 people, and compared to 8 million in New York, it just seemed like a very small town, and I guess it was at that time. In 1976, the Los Angeles Times finally broke open Long Beach's ugly little secret. And they titled the article, Government by Newspaper. And the editorial group at the then Press Telegram, which is not anything, I use the name because it's got the same name, but that is not the newspaper today, okay? They literally ran the city because people who were elected to the city council were beholden to the newspaper's support and endorsement if they were going to get elected. The city council selected their city manager. Therefore, the city manager was also under the thumb of the newspaper. And for example, we had no staff. There were 2 secretaries in City Hall. The mayor had one, and the other 8 of us shared a secretary. And so it occurred to me that it might be helpful to have a staff person who could help us, come up with ideas, or you've got 4 or 5. And so the federal government would make funds available to cities where there were unemployed or underemployed people, and the city could apply for and use these CETA funds to hire somebody. And so I said, hey, we could hire a staff person for the city council and use CETA funds. And Tom said, well, the first people you have to talk to is the people in the Press Telegram. Because, he said, nothing will ever be adopted by the city council unless the newspaper supports it. Now that was Long Beach in 1972. So he even made an appointment for me, and we went to talk to Dan Ritter, Sam Cameron, Don Ohl, he was the editorial staff person. And they said, well, why would you want any staff people? I mean, the city manager has staff people, and I had 1/8 of a mayor, of a secretary. What more would I need? And only Tom Clark and I were sitting in that room who understood what you would do with it. But they didn't think that was a very good idea because we might learn things that we were not allowed to know, truly. And there was such a lack of information that it was very difficult to even make rational policy decisions. So we went to talk to them. They didn't think that was a great idea. We would be stepping on the work of the city manager. It would be costly. What do you need? Spend all that, waste all that money. We know what you're a big spender. And so I had a weekly column in what was prior to being the Gazette newspapers. We had a little newspaper in Belmont Shore area. And I could write a column once a week. Occasionally, if I could get enough contributors, I sent out a newsletter. But they had an editorial board. They had a daily newspaper. They could editorialize about what a crazy idea this was. And much to my amazement, maybe because the city manager didn't want to forego the funds that could come in, or maybe whatever, he did go along with, and we did get I was allowed to hire a person. And I had a really great woman, and she was a single mother. She was a college graduate. She was unemployed, but she was very bright. And so we hired the first staff person, to help us. But the thought that if you want to get nobody else was coming up with ideas, but I had a lot of ideas of things that we could do in the city, but they would have to first be supported by Sam Cameron, the business manager of the newspaper, or you could forget about getting anybody else on the council to support it. So it was a really sick city. It really was. In 1975 was the first International Women's Year. The conference was in Mexico City. And my colleagues, I was the only woman, they said, Renee, you can go and represent Long Beach. And I said, oh, okay, I'm glad to do that. And one of the outcomes, it was a fascinating experience, but one of the outcomes was to develop a status of women commission in cities all over, that would be concerned with the things that we know, whether it's salaries or positions or equal opportunities. And I said, oh, that's a snap, I'll do that. And so we then had to have, nobody on the council wanted to support me. A status of women commission, that sounded, I don't know, communist, something terrible, whatever it was. In fact, one of my colleagues said, well, how about a status of men's commission? And so we did have some public hearings, and the women who came to object kept talking about status of women is S-O-W. And they kept talking about sows. It was just ugly, really ugly. But it never, like the Equal Rights Amendment, it died. I could not make that happen. And I thought it would be so easy. That's my naivety. So not always did we succeed in the things we attempted to do. But most of the time, I said, I couldn't do it from me. It had to come from someplace else. There's 900 and something acres on the far east end of the city, and I really don't know how the city acquired that land. But it was, in fact, the residents of the newer housing on the East End were having fundraisers to raise money to support getting that land developed as a park. And we finally put together a committee. I chaired that committee. And we finally persuaded the city council to put on the ballot it was a 10 cents per dollar, I guess, 10%, for 10 years, a increase of the property tax, because the city used to set its own property taxes. And that money would be designated for the development of El Dorado Park. It was very difficult because you could put houses on that land. There were, when I lived over in that part, there were cows. I mean, we had farms over there. But we worked with the PTAs, who were very helpful in persuading people to support this ballot measure. The man who really spearheaded it all, he owned, oh God, I'll think of his name in a minute, but he owned the drive-in movie where Kmart now is over there. It was a big drive-in movie, and he was pretty well-to-do, but he was from New York. And he said, houses near Central Park have higher value than any residence not near the park. So being near the park is a big boost for property values. And so we should develop this park over here, and that's going to be good for the city. It was quite an interesting thing as a grassroots campaign to get people to support taxing themselves for 10 years. But by golly, it passed. It was narrow, but we got it passed. And as a consequence, we've got this magnificent, and the concern was it would be a regional park. Why should Long Beach be spending its money for a park that will be used by people from all over? But every time I drive by and I see people at picnics and baseball, and I'm just absolutely thrilled with what we were able to do. At one point, before it got developed, when the Angels baseball team was coming to the West Coast, and some of our colleagues on the city council thought, well, we could get them to build the Angels baseball stadium on that 900 and something acres. They wouldn't have thought about, there were residences, how would you get in and out? It was terrible. But nonetheless, we beat them all down, and as a consequence, the city has this magnificent open space, golf course, greens, trees. It's just lovely.
Well, I think we all thank you for your role in that, because
Milk